Crisis in Russia. President Vladimir Putin is accusing the Wagner mercenary group of an armed rebellion, and he warns that those involved will be punished.
The head of the Wagner group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, says his forces have taken control of Russian military facilities in the region of Rostov-on-Don. He threatens to move on to Moscow if Russia's top general and defense minister don't meet him.
Again, we came here. We want to receive the Chief of General Staff and Shoigu. Until they aren't here. Until they aren't here, we will be located here, blockading the city of Rostov, and we'll go to Moscow.
President Putin calls the actions by Prigozhin a betrayal and a stab in the back to the Russian people, and he says those who follow him will pay the price.
All those who deliberately chose the path of treachery, who prepared an armed mutiny, who chose the path of blackmail and terrorist methods will face inevitable punishment and will answer both to the law and to our people.
We're following all of the developments on what's happening in Russia with our reporters and analysts around the world this morning. So let's start there with the latest on what's happening in Russia right now.
CNN Chief International Security Correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh is tracking the developments for us. What is happening right now?
We've never seen anything like this in Putin's Russia before. Quite unprecedented territory, a direct threat to his grip on power for 23 years. Now, at this stage, we are checking to see if the Wagner forces you heard about that are in Rostov, seen on the streets there, casually relaxed around key buildings. Remember, this is a military hub for the Russian war in Ukraine and forces across that southern region, to see if these forces are indeed trying to move, as they say they are, in the direction of Moscow. There are suggestions from some of their supporters that they may have got into the city of Voronezh, kind of halfway on the highway up towards Moscow. That is not confirmed and indeed denied by Kremlin-backed officials in that area. But at the same time, too, the governor of Voronezh has said that combat measures by the Russian military have indeed begun. That would be a suggestion that the Russian military are indeed taking on Wagner. Now, it's unclear the size of the Wagner force that has moved, but this all began on Friday with an extraordinary series of statements by their leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, essentially taking issue with the entire cause of Russia's war in Ukraine, saying that essentially Russians had been deceived and there wasn't a threat from NATO. Russians were not being persecuted. That was suddenly, it seemed, responded to by claims of an airstrike against a Wagner camp, probably inside of Ukraine. That's been denied by the Russian Ministry of Defense, but it's put into place this extraordinary series of events of Wagner forces, it seems, being taken from Ukraine and marching on a Russian military hub, Rostov-on-Don, and now it seems heading further. And the important thing to note here is, while perhaps Yevgeny Prigozhin may have begun all of this as a bid to take on the top brass of Russia's military, the defense minister Sergei Shoigu and Gerasimov, the chief of staff, now running that operation, it's now clearly him against Vladimir Putin. He's been utterly clear in his most recent statement that he thinks the president is mistaken to suggest this is a betrayal, and Putin was very clear that those who are now behind this insurrection have chosen the path of blackmail and terrorist methods and will face inevitable punishment. A suggestion in that speech from Putin, if you want to lay your arms down, there might be some succor, but frankly, straight up here, he was saying, we're going to put this down. The question is, can he? And how long does this go on for? Every hour essentially calls into question Putin's control of Russia, and more importantly, possibly too, for the world, quite how the war in Ukraine will play out in the hours ahead.